He never bowed. He never spoke. In a court where loyalty was measured in noise and spectacle, one silent human guard stood unnoticed, until an impossible threat slipped past flawless alien technology, and his single, unannounced move changed the fate of an empire that believed power had to be seen to exist. The court breathed in rhythms of light and sound, every inhale measured, every exhale translated into shimmering symbols that climbed the air like obedient insects. Vast figures moved through the chamber with deliberate elegance, their bodies tall, elongated, engineered for grandeur. At the center, seated upon a dais grown from living crystal, the queen watched it all with ancient patience. She was enormous even among her own kind, a towering giantess whose long arms rested loosely on the armrests, fingers tapering like sculpted pillars, her face striking in a way that made scale feel intentional rather than excessive. Beauty in her case was not softness but clarity, features stretched into something unmistakably sovereign. Every guard in the chamber performed loyalty as expected. Some radiated devotion so intensely that the empathic scanners hummed in mild annoyance. Others tried subtle variations, as if reverence could be personalized. One particularly enthusiastic noble bowed so often his ceremonial implants lagged, forcing him to freeze mid-prostration while technicians pretended not to notice. The queen found this faintly amusing. Performance always came with errors. Then there was the human. He stood near the outer ring of the court, small by comparison, absurdly so, a quiet punctuation mark in a sentence written in monumental script. He did not glow. He did not bow beyond regulation minimums. He did not trigger the ambient reverence fields at all. The systems, confused, pinged him twice, then politely gave up. The queen noticed this not because she was searching, but because the absence of signal felt louder than the rest. She adjusted her posture slightly, which sent a polite ripple of awe through the chamber. The human did not react. His eyes remained forward, his breathing steady, his presence stubbornly unremarkable. It was, somehow, impressive. An advisor leaned toward the throne and whispered a concern about possible ideological malfunction. Another suggested the human might be defective. A third proposed that silence was a bold new form of worship and requested permission to adopt it immediately. The queen suppressed a smile. She found herself wondering, not for the first time, why so much intelligence produced so little restraint. Her attention returned to the human guard. He shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, a movement born of training rather than nerves. No ambition flared. No fear response spiked. The empathic net reported nothing except a calm so consistent it bordered on rude. The queen's eyes narrowed with interest. In a court obsessed with being seen, the one who refused to perform had become impossible to ignore. The queen allowed the court to resume its carefully choreographed noise, but her attention had already slipped elsewhere. Beneath the marble lattice floor, the palace's cognition core rerouted subtle inquiries, sending threads of analysis toward the silent human. His designation flickered across her private interface, then vanished when the system failed to attach significance. It tried again with more enthusiasm, as if effort alone might solve the problem, then finally offered a suggestion that amounted to a polite shrug. The queen almost laughed. When even the palace admitted confusion, something interesting was happening. She summoned her chief observer, a slender giantess named Kithra, whose elongated eyes were famous for missing nothing except the obvious. Kithra bowed with perfect timing and began reciting data at a pace that suggested she enjoyed being listened to. The human, identified at last as Aaron Vale, registered no anomalies, no hidden augmentations, no treasonous fantasies, and, most offensive of all, no desire to be noticed. Kithra paused, frowned, and added that the empathic field found him boringly sincere. The queen raised a brow. Boring was rare. While the court argued about whether sincerity should be regulated, Aaron remained at his post, silently observing the spectacle with the distant patience of someone who had stood through far worse meetings. A nearby guard whispered a joke about how humans were trained to stand still because moving cost extra back home. Aaron did not respond, though the corner of his mouth twitched just enough to suggest he had heard it. The whisperer took this as encouragement and nearly overdid the humor before remembering where he was. The queen leaned forward slightly, her immense shadow passing over several nobles who froze, unsure if they were meant to applaud. She studied Aaron not as a subject but as a variable. When a minor power fluctuation rippled through the court's shielding, harmless, routine, and immediately compensated for, most guards stiffened in ritual alertness. Aaron adjusted his stance, eyes flicking once toward the source, then returning forward. Efficient, unshowy. The palace systems noted his reaction time and quietly revised their understanding of minimum acceptable. Later, as ceremonial refreshments floated in, one tray drifted dangerously close to the queen's armrest. Courtiers gasped. Protocol demanded 3 layers of permission before intervention. Aaron stepped forward, steadied the tray, and returned to position before anyone could decide whether to be offended. The silence afterward was profound. Then someone laughed, nervous and too loud, and the court breathed again. The queen reclined, amused now, curiosity settling into something firmer. In a place where every action was rehearsed, the human's unannounced competence felt almost rebellious. She decided, not for the first time that day, that she would keep watching him. The disturbance arrived disguised as etiquette. A ripple moved through the court's ambient field, subtle enough to be mistaken for a ceremonial modulation, and several nobles applauded reflexively before realizing no one had asked them to. The palace cognition hesitated, caught between ritual priority and threat assessment, and filled the silence by projecting a reassuring chime. It was a pleasant sound, widely associated with safety and discounts. Unfortunately, it was wrong. Aaron felt it before the alarms decided how to feel about it. Not fear, exactly, but the sense that something familiar had been rearranged without permission. His gaze shifted, not upward toward the queen or inward toward the court, but sideways, toward a maintenance arch no one had looked at in years because it was considered aesthetically complete. The arch shimmered, then failed to shimmer convincingly. That was enough. High above him, the queen noticed the change in his posture. It was small, almost rude in its subtlety, and entirely out of sync with protocol. While advisors argued about whether the chime meant applause was still appropriate, Aaron moved. He crossed the polished floor at a jog that felt offensively casual in a room built for grand strides. Someone hissed his name in protest. Someone else whispered that this was why humans were not trusted with nice architecture. The arch collapsed inward, not with violence but with intent, unfolding into a lattice of hostile geometry that confused the palace's sensors by being both inside and outside at once. Defensive drones spun up, then politely waited for authorization that never arrived. Aaron did not wait. He reached the arch, planted a compact disruptor against a node that should not have existed, and triggered it with a muttered comment about over-designed entrances. The resulting pulse was brief, inelegant, and effective. The hostile structure unraveled like an embarrassed secret, leaving behind a scorched pattern on the floor that would later be described as regrettable but historically interesting. The court stood frozen. One noble fainted, then apologized mid-fall. The drones powered down, relieved. Silence returned, heavier this time. Aaron stepped back into place, heart steady, breathing controlled, already filing the incident away as solved. He did not look at the queen. She looked at him. From her towering vantage, she had seen entire security doctrines fail in the time it took the human to act. The irony was not lost on her. She let the moment stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable, then laughed, a deep, resonant sound that startled the court more than the attack had. "Well," she said, voice carrying easily, "that was refreshingly untheatrical." Her gaze remained on Aaron, curiosity now sharpened into certainty. In a civilization obsessed with display, the smallest figure in the room had just rewritten the rules without saying a word. The court spent the next hour pretending it had always expected this outcome. Engineers argued quietly with philosophers. Philosophers blamed the lighting, and one advisor insisted the breach had been a morale exercise that simply exceeded expectations. The Palace Cognition Corps issued a formal apology to everyone except Aaron, mostly because it still did not know how to address him. Repairs began automatically, smoothing over scorch marks and reasserting symmetry, as if symmetry itself could restore dignity. At the Queen's request, the chamber slowly emptied. Protocol demanded distance, but curiosity demanded witnesses. So compromise was reached and everyone lingered just out of hearing range, which meant they heard everything anyway. Aaron stood alone before the throne, suddenly very aware of his size in a room that had previously ignored it. For the first time since arriving in the court, he wondered if silence might fail him now. The Queen leaned forward, her immense presence filling the space without effort. "You broke 6 procedures," she said calmly. Aaron nodded once. "You ignored 3 direct chains of command." Another nod. "You prevented a catastrophic incursion." He hesitated, then allowed himself a small shrug. "Yes, Your Majesty." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled, an expression that softened her towering features without diminishing them. "You realize," she said, "that half my court now believes you are either a tactical genius or an accident with good timing." Aaron considered this. "I've been called worse," he replied. A ripple of barely contained laughter passed through the listening courtiers. The Queen laughed again, openly this time. "You will not be punished," she said, silencing the room. "Nor will you be promoted in the way my people expect." She gestured, and the air between them filled with shifting symbols, none of which settled into a title. "You will serve as you already have, without performance, without spectacle. You will stand where others cannot see clearly, and you will act when others hesitate." Aaron felt something shift then, subtle but real. For years his discipline had been a shield, a way to disappear. Now it was being recognized not as absence but as strength. He straightened not in ceremony but in acceptance. "I can do that," he said simply. As he stepped back to his post, the court resumed its rituals, though something had changed. Bowing felt a little less convincing. Applause arrived half a beat late. Somewhere in the vast chamber, silence had gained weight. High above, the Queen watched the human guard return to stillness, no longer invisible, and smiled. Power, she reflected, did not always announce itself. Sometimes it just stood there, waiting until it was needed.